And I'm going to kick off the meeting here at 10:02 on July 8th. Welcome, everyone, and thank you, Helen, for sharing. So, what we're at, for those of you joining, Helen's been talking to us about a ton of events happening up at Lake Sylvia.
And
And it,
Schaefer.
I'm sure, yeah, and Schaefer Park up there. So, lots of things going on. Obviously, the forest bathing, yoga, and meditation will be the highlight of the season, I'm sure. It,
They have asked for this specifically. This is a repeat from a couple of other times. So it has an audience.
Sure it does. So, so best of luck to all of that. And obviously, I'm sure they could reach out to you, Helen, if there's any particular questions you have, right? Very good. Very good. And so another quick reminder that early registration ends on July 15th. So you've got another week to sign up for the discounted passes to the September education conference. This is a phenomenal way to clean up your CE hours for the year. And of course, once you register on this, you've got access to the recordings, right? I believe you were saying, Aaron, through like February of next year, right?
Correct, through the end of February.
Yeah, so long time to make access to it all. So super opportunity there. So mglearns.org, that's all you have to get to, mglearns.org. You'll be able to navigate to registration from there. Aaron, any other thoughts? Just any other comments?
Yeah, one thing I did learn is that I don't know if you remember early on they were talking about the shared learning experiences, and there are a number of counties that are doing those, but they are also doing a virtual one. So if you sign up for the virtual SLE, the way I think it's going to work is they'll put you in a group with other people who have opted into that, so you can actually have discussion with other master gardeners or other attendees about these the presentations on Friday.
Okay, very good, very good. So check that out. So we are here today. We have a lot to follow through. We have the July to-dos from Oregon State. Dan Benscoter will be joining us here to talk about the Lost Apple Project at over from Walla Walla, and this promises to be quite interesting. And I think as he'll share, he was actually at the Home and Garden Show, which is how he made the contact. Because I believe Scott, I believe he approached you all at the plant clinic table, and that's how we got the contact. So, do you recall, Scott, someone from the project?
No, I actually emailed him several months ago about an old orchard we have across the street. That's how I ended up contacting him. I don't think he was at the Home and Garden Show.
Okay, so I withdraw that comment. I think that's how I learned about the contact. Anyway,
Okay,
very
yeah.
very interesting in what he's going to be talking about here, because as I'm sure he'll talk about, I mean, at one time there were thousands upon thousands of different varieties of apples, and he's on
Jude
the.
actually gave me to read a library book by him, and that's kind of what got me going.
So Jude, it's a book. You have his book then.
It's a library book. Yeah.
Very good. Well, we look forward to that. Okay, so it's a busy month. I mean, April through the summertime is just hectic, 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 right? So we have a board meeting today at 1 o'clock, the same URL you're using here. So Mike will lead us. The foundation board will meet today. Plant clinics this Saturday in Owaco, next Monday in South Bend, and of course the garden tour on the 19th. And we'll say more about the tour just in a couple slides here. And of course, at the end of the month is the county fair. Now, as you saw from Wendy's email and from e-news, right? We need registrations for the county fair. Anyone, Wendy, want to share more about the fair in particular and the types of preparation and the types of docent volunteers we're looking for?
Yeah, well, I sent out the schedule so you can see the spots that are available. And Cindy does want you to visit the garden and maybe even work it, in the garden at least once before that so that you kind of are familiar with the garden. So but it's not a total requirement, but it does make sense to be familiar with the garden before you're trying to help the public. So I don't think any of the other spots have been filled, but that might be a Cindy question. Or Jude, maybe you can help out. I'm not sure. That's kind of Cindy's schedule. So it's
Just as a
important. Yeah.
it is very important, and I guess for everybody on the Zoom here, note that we will receive, I mean, thousands of people will actually visit the fair and will walk through the garden. This is a phenomenal opportunity to introduce ourselves. I kind of refer to this as kind of our front door, the front door to the Master Gardener program. So lots and lots and lots of people will see and will experience this, and so it's a phenomenal outreach initiative on the part of us to the public. Jude, any other comments you want to share with respect to preparations or sharing?
No, I'm sure that Rhonda will mention it, but we do have a greenhouse, a new one, sitting in the middle of the garden or on the side. But so that will be a draw. But I hope if anybody wants to work in the garden during the fair, please come early. There is so much there that people will be asking about, and you need to bone up on it, so to speak.
Very good. Okay. So coming up just for the 19th, right? More docents needed for the garden tour. And so this is Terry's post in the e-news for this week. This also is a big deal for us. And I think the location, up there in the Hoquiam area, right, is going to be another big pull and draw for people to visit. And I've also noted Lori's request here for cookies for the refreshment table. This is not cookies that we sell. These are cookies we give away that we'll have there at the plant sale. Terry, comments, other thoughts regarding docents and the garden tour?
Well, we've made some progress. We now need about maybe 6 more volunteers if we can possibly round up a few people. So we're close. We're close to having enough to sufficiently cover the gardens that we have on this tour. And 3 are in perfect shape. The garden I'm at is not, but it is historic and it is very interesting. So if Don Tapio was supervising this tour, he would not be happy with the weeds, but oh well.
It's educational, Terry. Point out the many weeds and how to control them or not.
Yes, and there will be some demonstration parts of the lamb garden because there is a resident deer population. And when I was there yesterday doing a little watering, there was a pair of fawns that dashed by and then went back down the hill and then went back up the hill and then were followed by their mom. So there's wildlife galore in the garden as well, and lots of bees. So anyway, it's a wonderful tour. The other gardens are lovely. They are meticulously ready for a garden tour. So lots of beautiful stuff to look at as well.
Of course, a plug for being a docent is that you get a free ticket, right?
That's right. You get to see the other gardens, which is really good this year, especially since we had a long driving route last year. This one has a very short driving route. The length of the driving one way is when you're in Hoquiam is 16 miles. So very manageable in terms of getting from one garden to another. In fact, 2 of the gardens are within a half block of one another.
Wow.
So, yeah. So that's kind of fun too. It's the largest garden and the smallest garden. They happen to be very located very close to one another. So that's kind of interesting as well. The 100-year-old garden and the 10-year-old garden. So
what a contrast. Scott, did you have your hand up? Something you wanted to say, share?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask Terry if she had a date for the walkthrough for docents on any of them yet.
No, each garden rep will be scheduling their own
Oh, okay,
walkthrough. And
great.
yeah, and the one for the lamb garden is not scheduled yet.
Okay,
But it will be next week, probably mid next week.
fantastic. Thank you.
Now, the other thing happening, of course, on the tour, right, is that we're all going to be at Barb's house. And Barb's hosting the plant sale. She actually bought extra property. She bought the parcel next to the house so that we would have a proper place to host the plant sale. So this is a big deal. I encourage everyone that this is the time to really start thinking about the other plants you want to put out and share. I know one of our local nurseries donated to us, right? At least 100 plus different plants, which we potted up and we're preparing now. So we'll be up there with at least a couple hundred coming up from our end, Barb. Do you want to share anything? Any comments?
Well, can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay, wonderful. Yes. So talk about team spirit, huh? I went ahead and bought the empty lot. But I think that the item that I had established before pretty well sets out the schedule. So what we're looking at now is that I'll be sending out the volunteer schedule later today. And the next week, there will be plant drop-off, and we will also have a plant prep on Wednesday and Thursday. So the hours that I'm going to set for that is basically it's an open house. It's going to be between 10 and 4 on Wednesday and then 10 and 2 on Thursday. So any time that you have to devote to helping with the plant prep, stop by my house in my backyard, 2618 Sumner in Hoquiam, and we'll be doing the plant prep to make sure everything is labeled and sale ready.
What time was the Thursday one?
10 until 2. Oh, in fact, I goofed. Let me change that. 10 to 2 on Wednesday, and then 10 to 4 on Thursday.
So 10 to 2 on Wednesday, 10 to 4 on Thursday.
Yes, perfect.
Very good.
And then Kelly will be there with all of his plants on Friday morning, and we're going to try to do at least some type of preliminary setup on Friday. And then, of course, we'll be ready to go on Saturday at 9 a.m.
Very good. So it's a full day. And the sale then is 9 to 5, right? On Saturday.
Yes, that is correct.
Very good. So the address 2618 Sumner Avenue. And you can't miss it, it's right on the highway there.
Right. And
So
it's the Hoquiam side of Sumner Avenue.
Yeah. So a couple thoughts regarding the plants, right? Is that some of the suggestions, right? So if the plants aren't blooming, some folks have suggested taking a picture of it, printing a picture out of it, of the plant, and and perhaps laminating it or bringing it along so that we actually can see if there's a bloom that is of interest or that would be compelling to encourage people to buy the plant, to have that picture, have a printed picture of it along with it. Any other comments, Barbara, with respect to the plants, the type of pots, the sorts of?
Well, yeah, we've pretty well asked consistently, I think, through the years for the basic 1-gallon pot. So we want something large enough to be of interest and saleable. And just take a quick look and inspection at your plants. Just make sure there's hopefully no critters, and any damaged leaves may have to come off, but just take a good look at the plants. Think, is that something that I would want to buy? So
for sure, get a label on it.
Absolutely. I've got extra labels if need be. I've got a few extra pots, but yeah, looking forward to it.
Any other comments from anyone? Questions regarding the plant sale in particular?
Robin, do you want to say anything about some vendors that are going to be there?
At this point, I have 3 vendors that are committed to being there. The guy
Oh.
from the,
I hope you know this, Barbara.
yeah,
I do now. Thank you.
Yeah, I was gonna call you today, Barb, and talk to you about it. But yeah, the last one was last night. He called Jeff, the the carnivorous plant guy.
Oh,
So he'll
that's
be
good.
there. And who are the 3? Oh, Ricky Cabine with his his ironwork stuff. And who's the 3rd one? All of a sudden I forgot. I forgot. I can't think of it. But anyway, they all just kind of let me know, yeah, they're going to do it. So and I'm hoping a couple more will get back to me. But if not, we have 3. And
This is going to be great. Jeff Green from Carnivorous Plants. That's going to be really cool.
yeah, yeah. And so anyway, Barb, you can just put them wherever you want them. I mean, however, when they get there. I remember last time we walked over the spot and tried to decide, but you got that big open space. They can sit, you can set them wherever you want them to be.
Okay, that sounds good. Have they indicated what time they're going to come in on
I just told them
Saturday?
that they needed to be ready by 9 o'clock. So they needed to be there early to get it all set up. That
Okay.
there would be people waiting at the gates at 9 o'clock. So,
Right. Okay, super. Well, and I'll be talking to you later today anyway, too, Robin. So
oh, okay.
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So as we look ahead, we talked about the Grays Harbor County Fair at the end of this month, and then near the end of August here in Pacific County, our fair. Mike, do you have any comments regarding the fair up in Pacific County and our prep for that?
Well, let me see, there we go. I'll be working with Wendy on a schedule on how to be able to make it work for the Give Pulse calendar. And so we're going to give that a try. Looking forward to it. I've had a couple of people contact me already wanting to participate. And so it's going to be an exciting time. So thank you for all your effort.
Okay, so put that on the calendar for August. Again, so no excuse for not getting your volunteer hours in or, because with all the opportunities we got making things happen. And then as Midge and I were talking earlier, is that Kim Arian, you recall her from the Home and Garden Show and from the talk she gave to us earlier this year about her rose garden perched precariously in the Columbia River Gorge. And so this is the one opportunity that she's giving for a tour of this garden. And so, it's a bit of a drive, but Midge says she's en route for it. And so there's an opportunity here to actually see what, the hundreds of roses that she has up there and and the unique space that she's actually having this garden, creating this garden. So there's the details, and you can reach out to either myself or to Midge. We all got this email here, and we can share this particular detail if there's if there's a question, if there's an interest in more information. Okay. Okay, so program updates. Just a quick update in terms of who we are, right? So we gather today as master gardeners who are committed to the WSU program, and we follow their precepts. We ensure that we are certified and we are sharing research-based information, research-based horticultural information to our communities. The foundation, right, which works to support the program, is a nonprofit 501c3. And that's the board meeting that will convene at 1 o'clock here this afternoon. And so, all this is leading up to the fact of reminding us, right, that we are a volunteer organization. We're a service organization, and it is our duty, our obligation to step up and volunteer. And so just as we've been sharing, there's no shortage of opportunities. And I would hope that we would find these chores not as an obligation or as a duty or as a chore, but as a fun thing. And we engage here because this is fun and it enriches our lives as well as it enriches those that engage with us. To that point, right, here's Wendy saying, record your hours, right? And Wendy and Aaron, you want to share a little bit about the fact that Give Pulse format is changing coming up in the next in the next few weeks, apparently.
Actually, on next Monday, it's actually changing to the new view. Erin is working, well, let's put it this way. They have a little few kinks that they're trying to work out, give Pulse. So until they get those worked out, the Erin already made a video, but then things changed. So she's probably going to be working, she can speak to that, but working on another video to help people through. But we are also going to do an live Zoom meeting. I'm not quite sure exactly when, to show people. It's a little bit different, but to me, it's easier. There's just a few things that Give Pulse didn't realize what we need, and that's the things that they're changing or hiding or whatever, so we don't have to go through too many slides. But in the long run, it's actually, I think, easier. So, Erin, do you have anything else to add?
No, I don't think so.
How are we doing with respect to getting our hours in, Wendy and Erin? Are we actually keeping up to date?
Pretty much. I'm doing some actually, Sally Hall is helping me look through all of our outreach and stuff and see how many people are putting in their hours. I'm not trying to micromanage, just looking at, the overall, but at this point it looks pretty good. Because of the new view, for some odd reason, Give Pulse unpublished all of our open events, so people weren't able to put in hours for a while until somebody called me and said, hey, I can't even find this. So we've corrected that. So that might have been a slight frustration for several people. So you can go in now and put in for open events, but we'll work it out. But people are doing pretty good.
Well, speaking from experience, if you don't keep up from it, right, you end up forgetting, right, when you did all this, right? So, so it's certainly is best to keep at it.
Yeah, make sure that you do it every month. That's, within the month. And some people keep a calendar and then they do it at the end of the month. That's fine. But like Kelly said, you get months behind and you can't remember it. It gets a little tedious.
Okay. Any other comments for Wendy and Erin?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So July to-dos. This is all coming from OSU, from Oregon State University. This is their time to say, hey, let's start thinking about fall and winter harvest. So here we are in a drought situation, right? Just easing into summer here. And already Oregon's thinking about fall and winter harvest, and so this is really an opportunity to think about the garden is going to play out. This is an opportunity to dig up our spring bulbs, right, when the tops have dived down. I know that, and of course, that the coast is Chinese cabbage, kohlrabi, and rutabagas at the Oregon coast. So it's lots of things to be thinking about in terms of planting. Okay. Maintenance, best time to water early in the morning. Water the toes, not the nose, right? So water the toes, not the nose, and deeply and infrequently to encourage root growth. And it is amazing how, and particularly the comment here about hanging baskets, right? It's amazing how quickly they drying out. And I'm actually at, well, and just because it has been so dry and actually not so humid some of these days, right? It is amazing how quickly some of these plants are drying out. Lawn clippings, right? And this is a key recommendation. Don't compost if you're treating those clippings with some sort of heavy weed and feed, the very popular um, uh, um, lawn additives that are there. So there's just an opportunity to think about that, especially when you're talking to your neighbors and maybe they are proudly talking about how they're composting their lawn clippings, not realizing that they're actually adding, all this herbicide chemical detritus to their compost. Pest monitoring, plenty of those to be thinking about, right? Over the next weeks here. Tomatoes, fruit trees, blueberries, roadies, right? Root weevils out there, cutworms, spider mites, right? So this is it's especially as I think about all the plants we're preparing here for the plant sale, it's actually have to be extra attentive, right? Because everything's getting it. All the critters are working on the plants, trying to make them appear as dull as possible ahead of the sale. that plus a couple of plus of all Terry's deer, right, are starting to nibble. They're sampling some of the plants, and they're finding them quite tasty. And it
Even tomato plants.
yeah, yeah, they definitely took care of a red elderberry, and the hostas that I was so proudly going to prepare for July 19th are now little stubs. So yeah. So yeah, we have a pest to keep track of here. Hey, nurturing potatoes, rhubarb, and asparagus, weed and fertilize, weed and fertilize. I don't know how everybody else's rhubarb fared, but ours fared terribly over the winter, and we lost half of our rhubarb. So it's just coming from the Midwest. It's an anathema for us to have to buy rhubarb in the grocery store. So it's kind of it's a religious thing, right? Is it grow your own rhubarb, right? Everybody should be able to grow rhubarb, but we're definitely having troubles here. Mulching to conserve soil moisture and staking tall flowering plants, all the plant, especially in windy conditions here at the coast. Any other comments regarding plant treatments or care or thoughts in the garden at this time from anyone?
I have a little something, Kelly. At the last Staying Mission Driven, Todd Murray, who's the director of the Puyallup Research Center, talked for a few minutes about pesticide recommendations and herbicide recommendations. And he mentioned that he's been getting emails from state agencies like WSDA and the Noxious Weed Board saying that master gardeners have been referring clients to those organizations and to those agencies when those agencies actually do not offer those recommendations, and they rely on the Master Gardener program to provide those recommendations. So it's important not to refer clients to agencies, to state agencies when it comes to pest and herbicide recommendations, because they do not provide those.
So is there an official site? I mean, are we thinking HortSense or WSU Extension that we should be referring people to?
HortSense is probably the first go-to for those recommendations. If I remember was it the landscape problems, or I can't remember the name of the actual book. It's might be a little out of date at this point, but I know that there are recommendations. I think there's recommendations in there as well. Scott, do you have a particular resource?
Yeah, I think when I get questions once in a while about what to use, and I just share the HortSense documents with them and let them make their own decisions. I don't recommend or not recommend any of that. I don't know enough about it, and so that's what I do. And that way it gives them all the information that they need to make their own decisions.
And HortSense was updated, I think, in 2023. So it is going to be the most up-to-date resource, WSU resource for that. And there was something else I thought of, and I can't think what it was.
The thing we found at our plant clinics is that when a problem is brought in and we talk about it, and they see us going to HortSense, they see us going to a WSU research, they see us opening up the WSU books, right, that have the pictures, right, of diseased plants. They're taking pictures of that. They're taking notes on that URL. So we're teaching them in terms of how to help themselves, just as Scott's indicating, where you can go to find information for yourself that is reliable, that you can trust. Okay. Hey, soil testing, right? Always always an issue and always an opportunity here. WSU and OSU both have labs listed that are approved, right? So there's an opportunity to be thinking about where we can go for soil testing. It's interesting. It's interesting soil temperature. And again, this is the plug for WSU Ag WeatherNet. And if any of you have not signed up for their weekly email of the weather forecast, right, I encourage you to do so. It's a phenomenal forecast, comes out on Monday and gives you the forecast for the entire week for the entire state. And it's a quick 2 or 3 paragraph synopsis of what weather we're going to have this week. I was actually surprised that soil temperatures are not much higher. And so we are still relatively cool, except obviously over there in Elma. in Montesano. So so the coast is still maintaining cool, and it'll be fun to watch how these soil temperatures actually increase slightly over the summertime here. And we see more disparate temperature changes between inland soils and coastal soils. Aaron, I'm really curious. Have you ever tested your soil temperature? I mean, because you're the furthest east of us.
No, I don't really. I don't think I've ever tested my soil temperature.
Interesting. Well, get a thermometer and do so. It'll be fun. It'll be fun to shoot. Step up, Aaron.
That would involve actually being able to get the probe into the soil and not hit rock.
Okay. 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 So I don't see Dan on the. I don't see Dan on the Zoom just yet. So I think we'll have to vamp here for a little bit here. But go ahead, please, Wendy. Yeah.
Just a couple of things. I sent out an email, obviously, saying about the EP 14, just to reiterate that even the interns have to take that. I asked Jana Ferris at a coordinators meeting, and she said, yes, everybody has to take it, anybody that is working with children. So it's pretty much everybody. And so I'm doing that tonight. I sent out the Zoom link. And then we also, Erin and I, have a meeting at the Extension office on Saturday for new perspective trainees. Right now we have 8 people signed up, which is awesome. It's so early, and we're hoping, and we're also going to keep the registration open until the end of August so that we can bring the information to both fairs. So that's it.
So again, that information was in your email relative to tonight, right? That's yeah. Yeah.
And I sent it out last week as well, but I sent out a reminder with the reminder of everything else. So yes.
And obviously, it is incredibly important that we actually do partake of that. So so please let's make sure that that you're getting that training in. You can appreciate how sensitive these sorts of subjects are, and how necessary it is for us to hold ourselves to a higher standard in terms of how we engage with the public. So, I encourage everyone to be thinking about
thank
that.
you, everybody, for the training. I appreciate it. I know that my list sometimes, because the email gets a little long and then I miss people, but for the most part, I think everything's up to date. So, thank you.
Hey, so let me vamp for a little bit, and I just want to give a quick just while we're waiting for Dan to join us here, and we talked about this book before, this new Talamy book, and I finding it kind of a compendium of everything he's written before, and for those of you who who've unfamiliar with Doug, he teaches at the University of Delaware. He's a rock star in terms of talking about the use of native plants and the use of the rethinking of your yard and your lawn. In the book, his key emphasis, of course, is on native species. And this, of course, is something that we all emphasize as master gardeners, especially the people who are new to the area who are coming in and who are sharing. The comments that he makes in the books and the very specific comments he makes here in terms of how native plants being essential, for the local insects and the birds that have adapted over time, evolutionary wise, to those species. Midge, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was wondering how many people have purchased or checked out the book, and whether people would be interested in a study group on this book. I don't know about you, Kelly, but I'm not reading it from cover to cover, but sort of picking out different topics and things that look interesting. So it's a different kind of book.
And let's make that a plug. It's a huge feature, right? You don't have to go from start to finish. It's a question answer format. So you can pick up the book anywhere, right? And just jump into it.
Yeah.
And so it's the organization it's simple. It's very approachable and very conversational in terms of the read. This is something
I agree.
This is something I really want to double down on, right? In terms of his thoughts here, is that we have a lot of people coming to us around clinics regarding how to maintain their lawns, what should they be doing with their lawns, complaining about, the challenges of maintaining lawns here in a coastal environment. and we obviously, this is not just Doug saying this, but you'll certainly hear Linda Chalker Scott from WSU Extension talking about this. What can you do to reduce your lawn, to make your lawn minimal, in size? And and letting the lawn go wildish to support native plants and native pollinators and so forth. So it's a very actionable and doable step for a homeowner, and you'll actually may actually be able to get rid of your lawnmower. Okay. And the point he makes is that you don't have to have large acreage to be thinking about these issues, right? You can make a difference, right? Even even if in a small yard, even in a small area. So even if you have to deal with containers and plants. So this is the collective action of you and your neighbors, right? And working in concert can make a big deal. And so this is it's a shout out, right, that he makes here in terms of that, one person can do a lot to their little piece of earth and making a big difference. And I think we've all seen that, right, with respect to even a particular container of plants that might be pollinating. All of a sudden, you see the insects, right? You see the bees, right? You see the pollinators that are flowing there. So it's amazing how, individual actions can have a much larger impact. And at his hub, by the way, homegrownnationalpark.org, right? This is his place, right, where he talks about what we all can be doing individually, right, to make these things happen. Okay. Very good. Okay.
Hey, Kelly,
Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to tell you that class of 2020, you brought us an Escalonia,
Yes.
and ours is beautiful, tall, and blooming. Thank you very much.
And probably attracting all kinds of critters, right?
Yes, it's absolutely beautiful.
Everything from bees to pollinating flies and of course hummingbirds, right?
Ah, yes, the hummingbirds. Yes.
Yeah. And so I'll have other Escanolia will be at the plant sale, by the way. This is it, it's just
Well, it's a good one.
it's a plant that keeps on giving, let me tell you. So
And it likes to be pruned, right?
it loves to be, it laughs at you. It says, go ahead, cut me anytime, cut me anywhere. It just laughs at you. It says, yes, I'll show you. Yeah.
It's a
And
good one.
So it does thrive here. Now, mind you, it's a good comment. I mean, so it's, I wouldn't say it's a native plant, right? But it certainly has
Right.
been naturalized, right? And it definitely seems to be doing a good job for pollinators.
Yes.
So, but it's one you do have to take after, because I'm sure, Lou, if you don't prune it right, it will subsume your house. It'll take over.
And my house is small, so.
See,
That has not been my experience with Escalonia at all.
is that right?
We lose probably about 50% of each plant to frost damage every year. It's more tender.
What do you get down to, Aaron?
We have gotten down into the teens.
Uh-huh.
Not regularly, but I would say, usually we'll have a really good snap in the low to mid 20s for a week or more. And that we have one that there's just like one little twig. It's all that survived from last year.
You have a longer frost period than the rest of us do.
Yeah.
So
yeah, because my last frost date is May 15th. So we get frost. I mean, we've had snow in March. Easy.
Along those lines, though, it was pretty close to when I moved into Monty. So back around, I don't know, 10, 9, 10, something like that. We had a winter and it killed all the Escalonia in Montesano. Now it's all grown back, but it killed it all.
So her problem is getting it established. If you could get one to grow a couple of years, it'd be okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got 4, I think, and they've been in the ground for probably 8 or 9 years now, and they're about 18 inches tall.
Wow.
Be thankful.
2 of them are actually blooming this year.
Can't hear Kelly.
Yeah, I've got David on the phone. He'll be joining us here in a second.
Oh,
So
good.
I am having a bumper crop this year of garden snakes. I'm choking on garden snakes. And so the grandkids are up from Montana, and so they're going out to the compost pile and finding all these snakes that are sunning themselves on the compost pile, bringing them in the house. Hey, Papa Mike, look at the size of this one. And some very impressive looking snakes. And so so it's cool, be nice, be gentle to them because I need the snakes. I want them. Don't hurt them. And so I'm just doing really good on garden snakes. One of the best years that I can remember. I have to be very careful when I'm out weed eating because there's just so many of them. I don't know what's going on. And then hummingbirds. The hummingbirds are just thick. I'm filling up 2 feeders every day. I'm filling them up. And so the hummingbirds are just really thirsty and strong this year.
Yeah. Well, Mike is still talking to the apple guy. You guys who have hummingbirds, what kind are you having? If it's only Rufus, don't tell me. But if you get anything else, please let me know.
We
We
have
have
a
Annas.
couple of resident Annas.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what we have.
Same here, Anna's and Rufus. And then there's a third one that's been showing up, but we can't quite tell what it is. We've got lots of them this year.
And I want to go back to Mike's comment about the snakes. Do you have any slugs? Because a friend had a snake on one side of her house, and she would carefully transport all the slugs over to that side of the house because there weren't any on the snake side because the snake loved the slugs.
Nope, haven't found the snakes to make that much of a difference. I'm rich with slugs,
Oh
and so
dear.
going out with a fork and stabbing and throwing them into the bushes, and so because it's been so gosh darn moist down here. We've been fogged in. The sun just came out a few minutes ago. We've been fogged in, and it's been a lousy spring and the start of a summer here in Oysterville, anyways. And the local joke is you don't like the weather, well, you wait 15 minutes or drive 15 miles and you have a whole totally new environment. But it's you can tell if you drive over to Astoria, do shopping, and you come back over the big bridge, and you can tell you can see this huge monster mile-long fog bank. And so you know you're coming back home. But it's not uncommon for me to get up in the morning. It's a stocking cap and a flannel shirt to go out and feed the animals. It's been that cool out here.
However, aren't you finding that the soil's very dry? I've been shocked at how low our ponds are that are out in our forest. They're at the low levels that we often see in August or September.
Yeah, I haven't quite seen the levels that low, but it is. It caught me off guard. And well, what's wrong with my plants? And you take a look at the soil, and gosh darn it, I mean it's dry. So
Yeah.
it's really can't underestimate or overestimate that the amount of moisture in the air and what little bit of rain that we've been having is coming down is sufficient. You got to get out there and help out a little bit, not a little bit, a lot.
That's what they're also saying about those terrible floods in Texas, that the reason it's more catastrophic is even though the air is moist, the soil is so dry because they've had a drought for 2 years. And so the any of the water doesn't soak in, it just runs off, which is the flooding, contributing greatly to the flooding that they're having.
You brought up a good point about all the moisture in the air, and I've got a dehumidifier in the house, and I empty it 3 times a day. It's a 50-pint reservoir that's in it. First
Wow.
thing in the morning, I empty it. In the afternoon, I empty it. Before I go to bed, I empty it. And every day, I am emptying that 3 times. That's how much moisture there is in the air. And so it's getting kind of old. And so I'm going to have to hook up some plumbing, drill a hole in the floor, run it through a vent and have it drain outside because it's lost its novelty, emptying the reservoir 3 times a day.
I have a plant clinic question, Scott.
Uh-oh.
Well, for anybody, for any master gardener who wants to help me solve this, I have quite a few of my, not all, but quite a few of my evergreen huckleberries have brooms. You know, they've grown brooms on them.
Yeah,
Yes.
Is
I've seen
there?
that. I've seen that in garlic, and
Ah,
I think in garlic, it's an environmental stress
uh-huh.
thing.
Hmm.
I don't know about the huckleberries.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can be caused by fungus, I thought.
It could be. Yeah. I think you're right.
I don't know specifically huckleberries, but in other species.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any damage on leaves or anything like that. It's just some of them, and one in particular that I can, let's see. Oh, not that one. That I walk by all the time is well, it's under an apple tree. So it's probably the soil's probably drier, but all my huckleberries are in dry beds. They're not in any beds that ever get watered. So I've just been kind of curious why.
Terry, you're talking about domestic, not the wild huckleberry, right? You're talking about the ones people grow for food, not the wild ones. But I've seen it on the wild
No,
huckleberry.
these are the wild ones, the
The wild
native.
the
ones,
red,
yeah.
the
Yeah,
red
they're the
ones.
Yeah.
no, not the red ones. These are the evergreen native huckleberry.
Right. Yeah.
Oh,
I've
yeah.
had it too, and they've been on our at least some of the huckleberry in the native garden in Elma. So it's pretty common phenomenon. So insects can do it, but I don't think that's what's happening. I think it is environmental.
Interesting. Okay.
AI is saying that it's caused by a fungus.
I'll have to look closer.
I posted on the chat that there's what the name of the fungus is that causes the growth. It's
Oh, it's a long word.
yeah, it's a rust fungus.
Yeah,
So they
exactly.
call it witch's broom
Yeah.
rust.
Now
So
rust on witch's broom will show itself as a powdery mass at some point, and that's not happening in the huckleberries at my house in Hoquiam, nor in the ones in Elma and the demonstration garden. So
I found an article on the Washington Native Plant Society's website. I just put in the chat about brooms on a huckleberry.
yeah.
Hmm.
So multiple causes possible. Looks like we may be not having our speaker today.
Oh, if you hang in there, he's on his way.
Okay. All right, that's good. That's good. However, this conversation is really interesting. Nice to have it. Nice to have this opportunity to do it. It's like we're having our own plant clinic.
According to this, it has an interesting life cycle. It alternates between the huckleberries and true fir trees. So it must spend part of its life cycle on a fir tree and then another part of its life cycle on the huckleberry.
Is it recommended to cut it off, to cut off the branches?
Well, yeah, pruning out infected branches can help, but the fungus is systemic. So it can be difficult to eradicate.
Okay, so it's not one of those ones that comes out of the soil and you can mulch around the plant and suppress the fungus? Sounds like
I'm
it's not
not,
that one.
It's
but
like
it
an
is
air
systemic, so
tributary.
it's inside the plant itself. I don't know. Good question.
I have no idea how I did it, but I'm in. But okay. I'm sorry. I really apologize.
Oh, there we go.
Yep. Yeah. Can you hear me? Do I need to,
Yep,
can
we
you
got you,
hear me
David.
and see me?
We got you.
I'm off the phone then.
That's you're off the phone. Very good. And I'm going to give you that. This is a. Let me just let David have a chance here to have a talk here. My apologies for everyone here in terms of that your patience, but indeed the discussion you all were all having regarding pests and so forth was really quite fascinating. So, David, thank you for joining us. And I'll let you do your own introductions here. But do you have any materials that you want to share? The
No, I today I just want to talk a little bit and let you know how we operate and how you can actually help in the search for lost apple varieties.
Most excellent.
Um,
So let's just begin by a little bit of introduction here. So first of all, you're talking to all of us here in the very far southwest part of the state, right? In Grays Harbor County and Pacific County. And so most of us are looking at saltwater as we speak here. And so I learned actually in preparation for this talk is that we actually reached out to you because of some questionable old orchards. We were trying to figure out what species of apples might be on those. And so perhaps this is an opportunity for you to introduce who you are, what you're doing with your nonprofit there.
sure. Well, first of all, I if you'd asked me 20 years ago if I'd be doing this, this is nothing that I had dreamed of doing or anything like that. I liked apples, but not in this way. But so I retired from federal law enforcement in 2006. And one of the things that I was doing in my spare time was I was helping a lady about 2 miles from me. I met her at my church. She was a missionary who had come back, but she was disabled, and so I would go over and help her out with little chores and things like that. Well, one day she asked if I could come and pick her apples. I was there on the spot there doing some other work, and it was fall, and I knew she had this apple orchard. It was about 300 yards away from the house. It was on the side of a hill, and also their well was in the orchard. So I knew she had the reason these trees were still alive was because there was subsurface water there and keeping them watered. And so I said, "Great, yeah, I can do that." I grabbed a ladder, I grabbed a bucket, I took off to the orchard. 10 minutes, came back, and I said, I can't pick a single apple. The trees had not been pruned in who knows how long. And I said, but I do know how to prune an apple. My dad had taught me. I usually had one apple tree or two wherever I lived. And I said, I will come back when the tree's dormant in the spring. I'll do some serious pruning, and probably in 2 to 3 years, you'll have some good apple crop. And so anyway, that winter, probably on a snowy day or something like that, I just got to thinking about that orchard, and I thought, those apple varieties are not going to be anything that I know of. And so I called her up and I said, "You know what was planted in that orchard?" And she said, "Well, yeah, I know one row was yellow transparent. Of course, that's the old Russian apple, first one to get ripe." And then she called her brother, and her brother knew that the second row was wealthy. And later on, I learned that wealthy was the first bred apple variety in the United States. And then I did a really dumb thing. I got on the internet, and oh my goodness, things just opened up about apple growing in Eastern Washington. Of course, everybody knows that Washington is wonderful for apple growing, but that's basically all along the Columbia River and its tributaries. And Eastern Washington is not, thought of as an apple growing. Well, all this history. I won't bother you with that history, but there was over 1 million apple trees in the Spokane Valley. There was a commercial orchard north in 1907. It opened up and it eventually advertised it had 20,000 acres of apples. I don't think they actually had planted that 20,000 acres. I think it was but anyway, at that time apple prices were enormous, and there's even a couple of instances where people would buy an apple or buy a piece of property that had an apple orchard on it in 1906, And in 1907, they paid the entire property off with their crop of apples. So apples were really big here around that time. Anyway, I just got involved in this history, and I was really drawn in by the history. Finally, one guy I really was impressed with was a nurseryman. His name was George Rudy. He was down in Colfax, Washington, and I got on some newspapers, old newspapers from the early 1900s, and I found an article on George Rudy. And on that same newspaper, there was an article about the county fair. Thought, oh, that would be interesting how they judge apples. Maybe it's the best plate of apples. Who knows? Well, as soon as I started reading this, I just stopped in my tracks because I realized I'd stumbled upon something really important. And the reason it was really important was uh, right after I had learned about there were some heritage apples grown in eastern Washington, and there was all these uh, uh, different people growing them. I had ordered a book from uh, Lee Calhoun. Lee Calhoun was he was a lost apple detective. He went around looking for and finding lost apples in North Carolina. Today, or excuse me, over the past 20 years or so, Tom Burford in Virginia, Tom Brown in North Carolina, Lee Calhoun in North Carolina, John Bunker in Maine, all these individuals have found lost varieties. And it was, I learned about that from reading articles of him and also Lee Calhoun's book. And I found that there were 17,000 named varieties of apples in the United States, but only 5,000 of them are still not lost. And so as soon as I started reading this list of apples on the county on the county fair article, some of those names I didn't recognize. So I started writing them down. And of course, there were the Rome Beauties and the Weinstapps. They're still around to this day, the Jonathans. But then I came across names that I didn't understand. So I wrote them down and then went to Lee Calhoun's book. And Lee Calhoun had his book separated by halves. The first half was old Southern apples that are still in existence today. And the second half was old Southern apples that are believed to be extinct. And so I opened the book and I'm looking, and sure enough, some of these apples that were in the fair in Colfax, Washington, were considered lost. And I knew it was big. I knew I'm the only person in the whole world that knows that lost apples were growing here. And it's like, what do I do? You know, and so I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to look for one of these apples, and one of the apples was Walbridge, which is another name for it was Edgar Red Streak, and so it's a red apple, and it's got red streaks on it. And I thought, well, that at least I could look for that apple. And I called a couple people with the Temperate Orchard Conservancy down in Oregon, and I'd met them at some kind of an apple fair or something like that, and I knew they identified apples. And I said, "Hey, would you mind if I sent you a few bags of apples that might be the Walbridge?" And the Walbridge was in Calhoun's book, Lost Apples, and no, as far as I knew, nobody had found it. They said, "Sure." They said, "Send us a certain number of apples in bags, and this is how you mail them, and all this." So I went around. And Colfax was kind of they had three nurserymen in Colfax. They had also a nurseryman up in Oakdale that had over 140 trees, the apple trees that he sold every year, varieties. And I just started driving around Colfax and in the country. And every time I'd see an apple that looked like it was red with striping on it, I stopped and asked the owner if I could pick some apples. And I think I came up with 3 or 4 bags of apples that I was going to send to Joni and Sean at the Temperate Orchard Conservancy. And just as I'm going to leave Colfax, I went by this water pump station, and leaning over the water pump station were some branches from a tree, and there was an apple tree. And I thought to myself, that is the weirdest looking apple I've ever seen. And uh, that apple, I decided I'd pick it and send it to Joni and Sean. Maybe they'd know what it was. And so I put it all in a bag, sent it off. And a few weeks later, I get a call or an email from them. They said, "Well, all those bags of possible wall bridges?" They said, "Those are not wall bridges." He said, "But we do know that other apple you sent us is the fall geniting." And of course, my reply was, "What the heck is a fall geniting?" And so I asked him, "Do you have a fall geniting?" Because the Temperate Orchard Conservancy, what they attempt to do is have every variety of apple ever grown in the United States and Canada in their orchard. And it's a conservancy will be perpetual, go on forever, never become lost again. I said, "Do you have?" "No, we don't have the fall genesis." So I started contacting the other apple detectives and government agencies. And as it turned out, fall genesis was a lost apple. It was our first recovery. And of course, I kind of got the bug after that. And so I think at that point, I think it was that at that point or the next year, I went to because this thing was snowballing, and I could see it was getting to be a little too big for me. It needed to be a nonprofit. So I went to the Whitman County Historical Society and explained to them. They said, "Well, give us a presentation." I did a presentation, and basically, I mean, apple growing in Eastern Washington is part of our history, especially in the Eastern Washington, surprising history. And they thought, "You're a match for our goals and what we're trying to do, which is preserve history in Whitman County." And they said, "You can become part of us. You can part of our nonprofit, but you have to raise all your own money." I said, "Great." And so we do our own thing. We raise money and we look for apples. And um, the basis of what we do and what we found to be the best thing to do is we look for homestead apples. Now, Eastern Washington um, was not populated at the same rate that Seattle and of course Oregon were populated. We had what they called the Indian problem, and in the early 1850s, uh, there was an incident. Well, in 1897, excuse me, in 1847, Marcus Whitman was killed and his family and all the children were killed at the Whitman Mission, which is pretty close to Walla Walla. Well, the army came in then and said, "No homesteaders, everybody get out of here because it's dangerous. We got to get a handle on this." So between 1853 and 1859, nobody could populate Eastern Washington. And then in 1850, end of 1858, they said, "Okay, we think it's safe. Go ahead and start homesteading." And of course, the first people that came in were people that wanted to live close to that fort, because that fort meant security, it meant safety to them. And so Walla Walla became the hub in Eastern Washington. And it just so happens Walla Walla has like three rivers coming into it and some creeks. Great land for farming, was wonderful. And today there's a Fort Walla Walla museum, and there's some. Anyway, it's a wonderful place. Well, so people came into Walla Walla, and that's in 1858. One of the first people that came was a nurseryman. And so that nurseryman would, when people got off their wagon train based off the Oregon Trail, they'd find a plot of land. Well, the first thing they wanted to do was plant apple trees and other fruit trees. And if you think about it, apples were the most important food that those settlers could grow. An apple could be, of course, eaten fresh. The first one is that Russian apple, the yellow transparent, that was brought into the United States in early 1800s. And uh, so you started with that one, and there were other ones. Then there were that was a July apple. Then there were August apples. There were September apples. Fall Genting was a September apple. It was called the greatest canning apple ever. Although I can't imagine it trying to. I've canned apple, or I've helped my wife or mom prepare an apple pie, and if you stick one of those apples into one of those apple core things, and you peel off the skin of it, it works great. Well, the funny thing about the this best canning apple ever, Fall Genting, it's got ridges on it. I always used to call it the corner apple because it had such distinctive ridges on it, and it would just go clunk, clunk, clunk every time you try to take the peeling off. Well, then of course, there were the September apples, and finally the October apples. And the October apples were the most important ones of all, because if you planted the right apples, and the perfect apple uh, for these homesteaders was the Ben Davis. And the reason the Ben Davis was so important was it lasted the longest in your cellar. And so you could, in October, late October, you would pick the apples off the Ben Davis. You'd put them in a barrel or crates or things like that, and you'd take them down into your cellar, and you could still eat a fresh Ben Davis apple in April, sometimes May of the following year. So you could eat fresh fruit for all those months. That was incredibly important. Another thing, apple, you could dry them, you could can them, you could sauce them, you could juice them. Let's see, even the bad apples you could feed to livestock. And at that time, there weren't that many bad apples because we didn't have the codling moth and some of the other insects that we have today. So these nurserymen provided that knowledge to their customers, and they would say, you know, and there were also nursery handbooks. There were homesteading handbooks. One homesteading handbook came from Nebraska and told that every family that homesteads needs to plant 100 apple trees, and they would say 20 Ben Davis, uh, 10 wine sap, 10 Rome beauties, 15 yellow transparent. And uh, and then they, of course, tell you the reason why, and there were always good reasons. And uh, so the apple was so important to people. And then later on, the trains came west, and in 1883, the train finally arrived in eastern Washington. Well, now these people that had home orchards and people that had also small commercial orchards could sell back east. So they would gather the apples, and they'd go to the train station, and there'd be somebody there to buy their apples, and there were as many as 100 different commercial small orchards in just one county, and they just bring it at that time of year, and then they'd have other apples to use themselves. Um, let's see. I've been very fortunate in online getting nursery catalogs online. There's a site. It's called Biodiversity. I think it's biodiversity.org. You can search that site um, for nursery catalogs, and it's wonderful. Hanford Nursery was in Oakdale, and I was looking for apples, and in Whitman County, where that nursery is located, and I stumbled upon, I did my same Google search all the time. It was like, apples, Eastern Washington, blah blah blah, and all of a sudden one day, a new entry popped up, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture was uploading these nursery catalogs to the internet. And here was a wonderful catalog, and it was the Vineland Nursery of Clarkston, Washington. Well, I had an article that said in 1907, I think it was, the Vineland or the Vinland Nursery had sold out to a group in Clarkston, and there was an article, 145 different apple varieties in this catalog. The relative of Mr. Hanford, she's on our Lost Apple Project committee. She gave me not only a one page sheet of apples that her great grandfather grew and sold at his nursery, but also a receipts book. And the receipts book gave me a total of over 200 apples that this nurseryman sold at his nursery. And we found one of those apples, one of those. I think we found three of those apples not less than 7 miles from the Hanford Nursery. That was on Steptoe Butte, which is very close by. Um, got lots of information about there's huge orchards today on Steptoe Butte, and from that were planted in the 1800s. And I was fortunate that uh, uh, it was fortunate that those records existed, and one of the ways I did the looked up the history of those. Nobody knew what the history was of those orchards, and so I got online and I started to find out that James Cashup Davis, who was locally kind of a famous person here, had owned 3/4 of Steptoe Butte back in the 1890s, and another fellow by the name of Robert Burns owned the other quarter of Steptoe Butte. Well, Steptoe Butte being so steep and the ravines coming off it meant that the farmers couldn't plant wheat in those ravines. And anyway, one of the tools I used was findagrave.com. Jumped on findagrave.com, whole family history of Robert Burns. And I contacted the person who put that history up, and they sent me the whole family history. It turned out Robert Burns married his wife in January 1st, 1888, and over the until 1893, they were trying to farm that land. It was terrible land. But I think the reason that they homesteaded it was, first of all, it was getting kind of late to get any good land. I mean, when you're getting close to 1890, that's all the good land has been taken. And today, with an aerial shot of Steptoe Butte, the quarter of Steptoe Butte where Burns had his farm, over 60% of it is still in pine trees because most of it is so steep you couldn't farm. But anyway, in 1893, this area of Washington had a horrible tragedy, and the tragedy was the fall rains came in early and continued, and the farmers in this area didn't get a single wheat seed out of the ground that year. All their crop was 100% failure. Well, Burns was a 100% farmer or 100% wheat farmer, so he had no income for that year. So what he did, he decided to diversify. And not 7 miles away from him was at that time in Elberton, Washington, what was called the largest prune dryer in the world. So he bought prune trees. He also bought apple trees, pear trees, plum trees, cherry trees. And if you happen to go to Steptoe Butte, and please do next year, not this year, because the Steptoe Butte is closed this year. But if you just drive and up and around Steptoe Butte, you will see all the fruit trees along the road. Most of those that are close to the road were Robert Burns trees. And we found on Robert Burns' property, let's see, the Dickinson apple. And on Cashup Davis property, we found the Arkansas Beauty. And right now we have a total of 30 apples that we have found. And I would really like to, let's see, I'm going to do it right now anyway. I'm going to deputize each and every one of you to become Lost Apple Project members or helpers. And what I want you to do is if you see an old apple tree, uh, first of all, if it's on your property, you've got your own permission. But if it's on somebody else's property, get permission. Tell them you want to send apples to some kook over in Spokane, and I've never been turned down. Um, so put on your best smile and collect. I need about 7 apples, 7 or 8 apples, and the first thing about them is, first of all, they have to taste good. If you send me a apple that doesn't taste good, that is not an apple that the pioneers would have planted. If you don't know, apples are apples when they are bred are sort of like humans. If you plant a wheat seed, it's going to come back to be the same wheat seed. But if you plant an apple seed, you're talking about 100% genetically different apple than any apple in the world. Okay, so you've got let's say in your garden you've got a golden delicious, and she's going to be the mother tree, and over here you've got a Fuji, and the little bee goes over to the Fuji. That's going to be the father. He collects some pollen. He comes back and he lights on what did I say? Gold, whatever that golden delicious blossom. That that's going to be a 50% golden delicious, 50% Fuji DNA. But the mix-up of the DNA is 100% different from any apple in the world. So what that means is you can't take, if you like Honeycrisp, take those seeds out. And even today, I see like on eBay places, people sell seeds. They'll say, "We'll sell you, gosh, we'll sell you 20 Honeycrisp seeds." And the poor people that buy those don't know that when they plant those Honeycrisp seeds, they don't turn out to be anything like a Honeycrisp. And the weird thing, you'd think, well, Gold Delicious and a Honeycrisp, that's got to be a great flavor. It's funny how genetics work, especially with flavor in apples. 95% of the time, with those two bread varieties, 95% of the time, it's going to be called a spitter. And a spitter is, you want to get that apple out of your mouth as fast as you can spit because it tastes so bad. Now, many years ago, when the Pilgrims first arrived from Europe, people were throwing out apple seeds, but they had a totally different reason. When they came over from Europe, they were from a hard cider drinking society. Back in the 1600s, the plague would go through every 15, 30 years, and people didn't know about bacteria. If you lived in London, you certainly weren't going to drink the water in the London River. It was just going to be all the human excrement was going in there. If somebody died from the plague, they threw their body in the river. Yeah, they throw their bedding in the river. They threw their clothes in the river. So people in Europe they didn't know about bacteria. All they knew was don't drink the water. Well, what can we drink? Well, if I drink hard cider, I don't get sick. And so it was a society centered on hard cider drinking. And even the children drank watered down hard cider. Well, today we know that bacteria is killed by alcohol. That makes, a lot of sense. Back there, they just knew hard cider, you don't get sick. Those people brought those customs to the United States, and millions, maybe 1 billion apple trees were planted back east. And out of all those seeds that were planted, once in a while, you'd get a good tasting apple. And then you'd go to your neighbor and you say, "Hey, you know what? Taste this apple. It's not like a normal seedling apple." And the guy would taste it. And he'd say, "Wow, that is great. Can I have a couple of branches from you?" "Oh, great, sure. Well, we got to call it something." Well, you're Dr. Steve. We'll call it the Dr. Steve apple. Okay. And that's how we ended up getting 17,000 name varieties in the United States and Canada. And we're on the lookout. We have found 30 lost varieties here in Eastern Washington, Idaho, and Oregon. And we've got several apples. I'm absolutely certain we're going to announce at least 3 new apples this year. But once I send apples off to be identified by apple experts, if they come back with a verdict that this could be a loss, we think it is such and such. It's up to me to go make sure, and then we send leaf to Washington State University. We've done this for now 3 years in a row. And WSU has a database of about 5,000 apples. And so there have been one occasion was I thought I certainly found an old tree. It's in Spokane. It was near it said the Manitou Dairy. If you happen to be in Spokane, Manitou is a common name in Spokane and basically very historical name. I thought this got to be an old tree. And I sent the apple in for genetic testing, came back to an apple. It was what was it? Something like the Jonna Gold. It wasn't Jonna Gold, but it was anyway. It was an apple that was created in the 1950s. Okay, well, that was a little bit disappointing, but I was also pleased because I don't have to do any more work on that apple. Try to figure it out. They figured it out for me. I can move on to other apples. Uh, so when you're out there and you happen to see a tree, it has got good apples, I encourage you to pick those apples, put them in a bag, eight apples, put them in a bag. Uh, let's see. Does everybody have my email address? I'm going to give that right now if you don't.
Put in chat. I can put it in chat for you, David, if you want.
Okay, good. It's dbens23@gmail.com. And what will happen is I'll have you guys send me an email, and then when the apple is ripe, and after that, I take those apples, I take pictures of them, and I do some administrative stuff. Then I send them off to the apple identification experts. We get probably 50%, maybe better identification from our Apple identification experts, and then the other 50% we have to work on a little bit. Sometimes it ends up being common variety. Sometimes it ends up being a recovery of a lost apple. But uh, and if it gets down to where we don't know really what it is, DNA testing is probably the best thing to do for that. Then,
So, David,
any
this is
questions? Can I answer anybody's questions?
it's a phenomenal amount of information you shared here. So we're hugely appreciative of this. So, Jude, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I need to ask, how can they do genetic testing on an apple that was existing before the Civil War when we don't have a sample of it? How do they get the genes for it? It seems to me they could only do genetic testing for apples that they are in existence or in a museum. So how do they do it?
Well, and is it Jude? I'm sorry, what's your name, ma'am?
It's Jude. Yep.
Jude, that was the first question I asked when I spoke to WSU, and it because if you have a lost apple, you don't have the DNA for that apple. But this is what the DNA does, and it is pretty amazing. Okay, so we get down the apple identifiers say this. We're pretty sure this is this lost apple. So great. I send a leaf off. We don't have to do it with apples. We send a leaf. Send that off to WSU. If it is a lost variety, they will come back and they will say unique. We do not have that in our database. But the other thing they also tell us, they can tell us who the parents were. So I've had apples where did not know what it was, and maybe the our apple identification experts, they're not really sure either. And so I get the DNA back, and the DNA happens to be red delicious and gold delicious. Well, I can tell you immediately that is not a heritage variety because red delicious was introduced in 1895. Yellow delicious was introduced in 2000, excuse me, 2000, 1915. So there, and basically I consider the modern era of apple growing from 1920 to present. And 1920 was sort of the cutoff date because at least certainly out here in the Pacific Northwest, because I have there was a little monthly magazine that all the nursery owners had a got each month, and in an article in 1918, they said to all the nursery owners, do not sell these varieties anymore. And they are not profitable. People don't even know what they are. These were apples that, maybe were best for drying or something like that. But these were 160-acre farms. And when the people at first homestead only had 160 acres. And if you were growing wheat, you had a couple of mules and maybe a couple of oxen to drag those plows and put the wheat seed in the ground. Well, certainly by the year 1900, that's not the equipment that was being used. And some people were starting to get even shortly thereafter getting steam powered tractors that could pull a plow. Did away with the oxen. They did away with and as you have seen now, a combine costs over $1 million. Well, you can't be a 160-acre wheat farmer with a $1 million combine in your shed, and so people would, if people decided, let's say they homesteaded in 1870, by 1895 you had to have some big equipment. You had to basically go big or go home. And some of the farmers got bigger and swallowed up purchased these farms. Some people decided to sell their farm and move to town, become a shop owner or something like that. And so that's how that's how these properties out here have become large scale wheat. Wheat is what has taken over out here, and a lot of it's because of the price of machinery.
Yeah.
Did I answer that for you?
Roundabout way, right, Jude?
Thank you. But I will no longer imagine that there's some little old gentleman in a back room like a wine taster who's tasting the apple and smelling the apple and looking at the color of it and seeing how thick the rind is and trying to determine what it is. You've gone science.
No, that's exactly what our experts do when we first send them the apple.
First, yeah.
But if they, and like I say, they can identify pretty easily about 50%, could be a little bit higher than that. But they're used to us sending them wine saps, Rome beauties, yellow transparent, because those were extremely popular apples and they have not been lost. I live just north of Spokane. We have a little area called Green Bluff. It's kind of up on Mount Spokane. lots of you pick orchards. And I like to go to one orchard in particular because it's got so many varieties, a lot of heritage varieties. But yeah, that's what the people do. An apple has 50 characteristics. I mean, have 50 characteristics is mind blowing. And yet these people, what they used to do was they used to go to, and they trained under somebody who, and they would go to county fairs, state fairs, fruit festivals, harvest fairs, and they'd set up a little table, have their books on it, and people knew that they came to the fair every year. So people would come, every year and bring them apples and say, "Can you please identify these for me?" So yeah, it's come a long way though with DNA testing. It helps. It really helps because we don't, and that way we don't misidentify uh, an apple that's not lost.
I have one more question if I could ask it, and that is, you said that there is in Oregon a conservancy. Where is that conservancy? Do you know what?
That conservancy is in, all right, I write the name down very, uh,
Is it Lynn County?
it's very close it's very close to Portland. Grab it here. Oh, yeah.
Malala. I have it on the website here.
You have it.
The Temperate Orchard Conservancy.
Yes. Yes. Malala. In Malala, Oregon.
Of course it's in Malala. All right. Thank you.
But you'll see it right there on the website, temperateorchardconservancy.org.
That's great.
And
yes,
so
Scott.
there's Scott, go ahead. You're on mute.
I think we're muted.
You're still on mute. Yeah. Still on mute. Nope. Still on mute.
Wow.
It's uncommon to see Scott this muted.
uh,
David, it's just what I'm taking away from your talk here. I'm amazed by how much work WSU has gone into this, the G&E, the sequencing of all this, and the fact that they've really gotten into this, and and by the way, how you as an individual helped prod WSU Extension to get into this. So kudos to you just for your individual pursuit of this. But Scott, back to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think you can hear me now.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So yeah, David, I got some apple grafts through the conservancy somewhere back east, and they sent me 5 different apple varieties, all heritage and rootstock, and I grafted them, and I had 100% success. Yay! They are the Northwest Greening, the Maiden Blush, the Pewaukee, the Northern Spy, which I've heard of, and the Whitney Crab. But I don't know anything about the Greening or the Maiden or the Pewaukee. Can you tell me a little bit?
The best thing I can do is tell you of a resource.
Okay.
Dan Bussey, he's a little bit of a apple hunter, but mainly he is a historian. And Dan Bussey, it took him 30 years to write a book. And the book has been out now probably about 6 or 7 years. And it's called The Illustrated, is it the Illustrated? I think it's the Illustrated Guide to Apples in North America and North America.
And Canada. No, you're good. United States and Canada. You're so close, David. So close.
United States. Okay.
Okay.
And his book describes those 17,000 named varieties.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know. It's incredible. The book is 7 volumes. And they're
Oh,
big, and they're big. It's not like you got a little
Yeah.
book.
It's
7 volumes.
it says
When they
each and
came
each
out,
volume is 500 to 600 pages.
With
yes,
hand painted pictures.
so another
with many.
question,
Oh,
while I have you. So these old varieties, were they generally then grafted and were they on like more of a standard root stock back in the old days? Were the
yes.
trees big?
Matter of fact, uh, I do want to come back though. What was the thing we were talking about just now? Before your last question.
Uh,
Well, the
the
illustrated history.
illustrated book.
Yeah, let me come back to, I want to come back to illustrated history. And then what was your second question?
Whether they were generally grafted in the
Oh,
old days onto the
yeah.
larger root stock.
Okay, so what they would do in the old days is they would take uh, apple seeds and they uh, back in the early days of the United States, they had cider mills because cider was so important. And all you had to do was go to the back of the mill, and where all the mush and seeds came out, you just dig through and grab a bunch of seeds. Uh, then during the winter, the seeds had to be lower than freezing for several weeks, and then you'd keep them dry, and then in the spring you would plant those seeds. Those seeds would grow up. Those are called roots, standard root stock, because it just came from a seed. Seedling orchards, and then if you wanted a good tasting apple, instead of cider apples overall taste pretty terrible. A good cider apple, is going to make your mouth pucker. It's got different, and the best cider comes from having a bunch of different apples all together. But so they would take those seeds, and in the case of my nurseryman in Oakdale, Washington, I have his records, so I know how he did things back in 1904. He would order seeds from back east. I'm picturing them in big gunny sacks, and when they'd reach him, he had a he had a special tool, and the tool was like it was like a tiny push cart, and it was called the Planet Junior uh, seed seed dropper. That was it, Planet Junior seed dropper, and you can still find pictures of it online if you go to Google and images, and you just basically went down a row, and you could tell the machine, I want four seeds to drop every foot, or 3 seeds to drop, or 1 seed to drop every 6 inches. Whatever you wanted, this little push thing worked for him. I have a picture of Mr. Hanford out in his rows of seedlings. And so once they got probably either after 1 year or after 2 years, you could come in and graft what you wanted to that.
Okay.
And so if you wanted yellow transparent, then you'd take a bunch of yellow transparent grafting wood. Grafting wood is basically the previous year's growth, and you would take that and you collect it in the dormant season. What we do here is we collect in usually in February and get all of our dormant wood, and then we order rootstock because we don't want to put apple trees on standard trees that could, be 60 feet wide, and uh, and then we graft to those rootstock, and I've got people have ordered. One thing that we do with the Lost Apple Project to make some money so we can keep going is we sell scion wood or grafting wood. We also sell trees, and so in the spring, we will get perhaps 150 to 200 rootstocks, either on, uh, and rootstock have different names. Uh, there's probably 100 different rootstocks, but we use an M7, which is a tree that only grows to be maybe about 12 feet high, something like that. And then we also do M111, which is a larger tree, maybe closer to 15, 18 feet high. We get away from dwarf. We don't do dwarf trees because I don't know if you've all been through the Okanagan Valley or Yakima recently, but the old days of having these big apple trees on standard rootstock, the standard trees can get, good grief, 3 to 4 feet in diameter. And with what they want to, the apple industry wants to do is uh, get apple picking um, by machines. And you can also go on YouTube and you can uh, get apple picking, put in an apple picking machine. You'll be amazed at what they do now. They plant little trees on dwarfing rootstock. What dwarfing rootstock means is the trees get mature quicker because their root ball is tiny. And if the apples grow like they're expected to grow, the root ball cannot keep that tree upright. So what they do is they put a post at one end of a row, and they put a post at the other end of the row, and they string wire between them. And then as the tree grows, they attach the tree to the wire. And most apple orchards are under, well, 9 feet tall now.
That central
And
spindle.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Huh, amazing.
Other
So
questions?
in the old days, when they had those large trees, I saw something not too long ago where they umbrella pruned them to bring the branches down. Just another.
Yeah,
It's
I'll tell
probably
you,
endless.
there were a lot of different uh, different ways to do things back then. Some
Sure.
people even would say plant or graft to crabtree rootstock. But then other people would say, well, no, I want it to grow on its own roots, the tree to grow on its own roots. And what that meant was, so let's say you had some crabtree rootstock. So the tree, and you could do this even, back in 1800s or 1900s. If you had a crab apple tree, you could, grow crab apples. You knew they weren't going to get over 15 feet high. But if some people said, well, I want to grow them on their own roots. So what they would do is they would have their grafted tree, and then they plant the hole deeper than the tree needed to be. So the graft was underground. So now the tree will spread out roots from its own grafted section, and it will be a tree growing on its own roots.
Huh.
Now, that's what some people did.
Huh. Very interesting.
So I wanted to make a note. I think you saw some of the screens I was sharing earlier. Is that David's book is available at Timberland Regional Library. So the Lost Apple. There's 3 copies at TRL. So his book is available. The Illustrated History of Apples, unfortunately, is not available in TRL. But for a low $400, you too can have the entire 7-volume set. So planning.
You should not have to pay $400. I'll tell
Is
you
that
what.
right?
If you send me an email, those books have been discounted to only $150 for all 7 books.
Holy cow!
It's a huge, yeah. And I wanted to mention also about the pictures in these books. The pictures in these books are actually watercolor paintings. And between 1880 and 1920, the U.S. Department of Agriculture contracted with watercolor artists to paint to paint fruits and nuts. Well, back then we didn't even have, back in 1880 we hardly had color, or excuse me, black and white photography. So there was no possibility to have a color photograph of an apple. So what the Department of Agriculture did was so valuable to us today, because as we look for these lost varieties, the more popular apples, like a wine sap or Rome Beauty, you'd probably have 10 different artists paint a picture of those. But for example, the fall geniting, there was one painting of a fall geniting, and uh, we were very fortunate to have it. And I believe all of our apples that we have identified as rediscovered varieties, all those had their apple was painted.
They do look like
And those
just
books
beautiful paintings. They really do. Yeah.
They are amazing.
Okay. Hey, so again, put this on your Christmas list, everyone. That's for sure. This should be a must do. Now, a reminder, I've got David's email is in the chat, right? So and I appreciate, David, your willingness for us to reach out, because we actually do see people come to us often, and saying, look, I just bought this property. They got this old apple tree sitting here. Do you have any idea what I should be doing with it? Right. And so this is you are truly helping enrich our set of resources in terms of what we can do in response to those queries.
And when you're one of the first things when I send you instructions, it'll be easier. But one of the first things we do is we map out the orchard. So because it's easy to go out and pick a red apple, but if I contact you the next spring and I say, hey, you sent me 3 apples, one was a red one, and if the apples aren't on the tree, sometimes you forget which tree it is. So if you make a map and you write what we do, for example, what I do, and if I was to come to your house and you had a heritage orchard or that was planted, we believed it was planted prior to 1920. I would come, first I would do is I'd get a piece of paper and I'd start making circles of where the apple trees were. I might add your house so to give me a reference point. And then I have a little Garmin GPS unit. I'd turn that on and I'd do the GPS coordinates of that tree. I go to the next tree, do the GPS coordinates of that tree. You don't have to be that fancy if you only got a few trees in your yard, but at least write down which one is the one that you sent me, so we're never confused.
Other questions, other comments for David? Well,
I had a comment, when I was growing up, my mother always used yellow transparents, and you mentioned them several times. They were the best for applesauce and baking and stuff. I don't see them much anymore, like in stores or whatever. So where would one find those apples?
Well, 2 ways to find them. One is especially if you've been hankering for an apple pie made out of yellow transparent apples, I would first look for You Pick orchards in your area and find out if anybody has a lot of old heritage variety apples. And then beyond that, you can buy yellow transparent from many online nurseries. There's a couple of online nurseries in Washington that are very good. One is Burnt Ridge Nursery, and the other one is Rain Tree Nursery.
Okay.
And
I know
I'm
both of those.
pretty sure. Good.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. Yeah, the other one was Gravenstein, and I actually bought a house one time because it had a Gravenstein apple tree in the backyard. So, That was the
That's very
selling
good.
point.
That's great.
David, thank you so very much for this time here. This is really, it's been fascinating. Your knowledge is obviously just, it's profound in terms of what you just did, in terms of your
I
ability.
apologize. I apologize for not looking at my calendar this morning. I try
I,
not to do that, but
I should have prompted you with an email reminder, is for sure. Hey, but I want to thank you and I want to thank everyone here for joining us. Reminder that our foundation board meets at 1 p.m. At 1 p.m. today, the same URL. Everyone is welcome here to join us. And of course, as we said early on in the meeting, it's a busy month. So strap in, volunteer up, and we will see you at the many events we have coming on this month. So thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thanks
all
for
right.
showing up.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.
That was very good. Really good.
Bye all.